Welcome to WebRTC Live. In WebRTC Live, we cover the latest technical topics and business use cases for WebRTC and live video. As always, this episode is brought to you by WebRTC.Ventures, leading integrators of WebRTC video into your custom application.
Welcome to WebRTC Live. I'm your host, Arin Sime, founder and CEO of WebRTC.Ventures. And we're doing a very special episode of WebRTC Live today, broadcasting live from the RTC.ON conference in Krakow, Poland. So thanks to all of you joining us, not only through the normal WebRTC live streams on YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn, but this stream is also going out to the RTC.ON conference attendees attending virtually today. The rest of the conference is on a coffee break right now. And so we're going to take this opportunity over the next 30 minutes to talk with a few of the speakers from the conference and just hear a few minutes about their presentations. The conference, the RTC.ON conference, has been put on by our friends at Software Mansion here in their beautiful office in Krakow. And it's really been a fantastic conference so far. I'm really enjoying it. My personal first time in Poland. And heard a lot of great things about this conference last year. So very happy to be here in person this year with WebRTC Live and speaking with some of our guests. So we will be speaking with several people from the conference today. We'll have Alfred Gonzalez from WebRTC.Ventures speaking in a moment, Violona Popova talking about WebSockets and React Native, and Matthias Front from Software Mansion, talking about the membrane framework. And so for those of you watching us live through our normal channels at WebRTC Live and WebRTC Ventures on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch, you're welcome to ask a question anytime in the platform of your choice, and we will see that here. And for those of you on the RTC conference stream, you're also welcome to ask a question. We should see that here as well, and we will be happy to address those with our guests. So let's start with you, Alfred. Alfred, just tell our viewers, remind them who you are, where you work, and what you're talking about at the conference today.
Hi, Arin. Thank you. I'm a WebRTC engineer, and I work at WebRTC Ventures, and I've been already working for 4 years almost. And I work on different projects with real-time communication, with web real-time communication.
Excellent. Yeah, and like so many companies these days, our team is very virtual. So a great opportunity at these conferences to not only meet others in our industry, but also sometimes each other. Since we work remotely so much, we don't get to see each other within our own team in person that often. So tomorrow you'll be talking about boosting inclusivity, closed captioning and translations in WebRTC. So tell us a little bit more about give us a little preview of what you're going to discuss tomorrow, maybe 2 or 3 key points about it.
Okay, so I'll start first with some key concepts about closed captioning and translations. And I'll list a few different service options that you have, and what are the key characteristics that you can look for when selecting one of the services.
Perfect. And
then I will show a real-time, real scenario implementation in a WebRTC application, and how I managed to do that, and some issues that I faced.
Excellent. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about can you tell us a little bit about some of those issues that you faced? What are some of the challenges you faced with building real-time translation?
Yeah.
Transcription, excuse me.
Yeah,
and translation, captioning, translation, all of it. Yeah, so lots of challenges, I'm sure, to discuss there.
For sure, because closed captioning is basically a real-time transcription, and we are also adding translation. And the service that we chose had different implementations, and we had some issues sending the real stream with the audio to the service. But yeah, the main issue was to build a new backend service to send and process all the data and then send it to the speech service.
Yeah. One of the talks earlier today at the conference by Rob Pickering, who I think we'll have on WebRTC Live at some point to discuss this and more with him. He was talking about the complications with real-time audio of breaking the conversation into chunks when you're sending it to an LLM, things like that. Did you run into issues like that as well with the real-time nature of the audio?
Yeah, well, luckily for transcription, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Because you can get, you just need to get the transcription. With LLMs, you want to get the context of everything that is happening. So then, yeah, you have some further issues with processing the text.
Yeah, ultimately, you're still doing this around a conversation between two humans in real life. It just happens to be virtual, and so latency is not as much of an issue in the transcription service itself, I assume, right?
Yeah.
You're not trying to talk with an LLM, thankfully. So that's good. And so latency still, of course, matters because we want to see the captioning, though, pretty close to where it is in the conversation, but we've got a little bit of flexibility there, I assume, right?
Yeah, you can get it. You want it to get it as fast as you can possibly, and it's pretty fast. And I'm sure that most of the services provide real-time transcription pretty fast, and it's probably not noticeable between the services.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and was there anything particular about doing the translation aspect of it that you found?
Well, for translation, it's a bit more simple because it's only doing text translation. So the basic thing is that you want to do transcription of the conversation, which is the hard part, but text translation, it's a bit easier. But of course, depends on the languages. So its service may provide some languages that you can transcribe from and that you can translate to.
Yeah.
And maybe the translation is not that accurate.
Yeah.
So that depends on the services.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about that a little bit with the accuracy of it, because when you look at when ML is used for real-time transcription, sometimes depending on how you implement it, right, you can get an updated transcription, a caption as you go, right? There's sort of the first pass of the captioning that depending on how the service is implemented, that will have like one level of accuracy, but then as it hears you say the whole sentence and gathers more context, right, the transcription can get more accurate and go back and sort of update the words, right? So you can implement that in as well. And so you've got that before you've even gotten to a translation engine, I imagine, right?
Yeah, well, it's a bit different, but close, because you are getting partial results of the transcription, and the translation is actually also on real time. So you are getting partial translations, and the translation may change a bit.
Yeah.
So maybe you see that the transcription updating a bit weirder when it's with translation than with the transcription, because the transcription mostly detects the words more accurately. So it doesn't change much.
Yeah. Interesting. Excellent. Would you have any other particular advice that you would give to developers building in real-time transcription and translation into their applications?
Yeah, the best advice, I think, it would be to check the features that the different services offer, and to make sure that you are selecting the one that you that provides all those features that you must have in your business model. And if they have also additional features, then that's perfect.
Yeah, and I imagine since there are a lot of different features across them, prototyping with them as well is going to be really important to confirm those different features. So excellent. Well, Alfred, thank you so much for taking a few minutes with us to tell us about your talk. For those of you watching the conference stream, you'll be able to see Alfred speak tomorrow on Friday, and then I can say with confidence, since we work together at WebRTC.Ventures, that we'll also be blogging about it on our site at WebRTC.Ventures soon as well. So we'll have some additional details there, as well as the recordings of all the talks will be up on YouTube eventually also. So again, thank you, Alfred, for joining me today. Appreciate
Thank you, Arin.
Thank you. All right. We have our next guest coming in. Violina, please join me. Thank you.
Hello.
And just pull the microphone towards you, if you would, please.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, you can go a little bit closer.
Okay.
There we go. Excellent.
Okay.
All right, very good. Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of the conference and the coffee break to come join me here on WebRTC Live. Looking forward to your talk as well. Will be also tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you start by just introducing to our viewers, tell us a little bit about your, where you work and what you do, and then we'll get into your talk.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am software developer and I work for Clip My Horse. This is leading provider of live equestrian sports broadcasts. And actually, annually, we stream more than 2,500 events to more than 4 million unique users.
Wow.
Yeah, so streaming to such amount of users require really robust infrastructure. And that's why WebSockets are preferred choice in our case.
Yeah, excellent. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So your talk tomorrow is real-time video streaming with WebSockets in, excuse me, in React Native. So tell us a little bit more about what you'll be discussing in that talk.
Well, first, I will make a comparison between HTTP protocol and WebRTC, and actually, I will show why, in our case, WebSocket is the preferred solution. I will also show how WebSocket service can be implemented into a React Native app.
Okay.
And I will also show some live demo of how WebSocket service really work in our case, because we are using it for several purposes. We are delivering real-time updates during the live streams, like competitor scores, information about the rider and the horse. Also, we are using WebSocket to detect multiple logins from different devices, and we are preventing that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that in particular, because this is around it like a security, excuse me, or a subscription, were the words I was trying to combine there, because is this a subscription service, and so you're worried about access to it?
Actually, when stream is started from a user device, so WebSocket sends information to us, and for example, if the user starts stream on another device, we receive duplicate event, and the first started stream is blocked. That's why we are preventing multiple account usage from one single account.
Excellent. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So tell us a little bit more about the choice of WebSockets specifically.
Oh, well, in the equestrian world, every second counts, and actually, users expect seamless experience while watching equestrian competitions, and that's why WebSocket is selected as a solution in our case, because it provides low latency, also scalability and interactivity, which is important in for real-time applications.
Yeah. So in your application, are you worried about the streams being like synchronous across viewers? Is it important that if you and I are watching on two different, applications, that we're both seeing the action at the same time? Or is it more about just getting that to each of us individually as fast as possible?
Actually, I think that we tend to deliver seamless experience, and because few seconds of delay actually can cause, for example, in some disciplines, can cause even some competitor to lose the competition. So, as I said, every second is important.
Yeah, every second's important, and with the technologies we're talking about, really every millisecond is important too. The number of milliseconds in whether it's a real-time conversation with WebRTC or a live sports streaming like this, incredibly important. And so there's been a lot of interesting conversations in the conference so far around things like latency, always an important topic in our industry. So let's talk, love to hear just a little bit more about kind of the React Native side of it. And did you is this a mobile first application, or do you also have a web application built in other technologies?
Yes, actually, we have mobile application. We also have web application and smart TV.
Okay.
And yeah, actually, we are covering all specters for our users. We are trying to achieve this seamless experience on all devices.
Yeah, excellent. And did you run into any particular challenges with either like the TV devices or with just doing this in React Native in particular, as opposed to the website?
Actually, for all of the platforms, we are using different technologies, and I'm particularly working on the mobile app team, and I can talk about the different platforms, but of course, there are a lot of challenges for the mobile platforms, but we are an amazing team and we are doing everything together.
I'm sure, yeah. And I look forward to learning more about it in your talk tomorrow. Let me just ask one more question. Do you have any advice that you would give to other developers watching this who are maybe using React Native but looking to do something with streaming media or WebRTC conversations for the first time?
Well, they have to choose the protocol which is most suitable in their cases, whether it's WebRTC, WebSocket, or something else. And don't be afraid to experiment with the technologies.
Yeah, don't be afraid to experiment, definitely. As we were just saying with Alfred too, in the prior conversation, lots of prototyping, right? There's so much. I mean, every talk that we're seeing here at the RTC conference, there's a lot being done on the bleeding edge of these technologies, and so it's incredibly important to do a lot of experimentation and prototyping, as well as learning from our peers like Violetta, all of the excellent speakers here at the conference. So thank you so much for taking a little bit of time with us. Is there anywhere that our viewers can go to learn more about your work or the application that you work on? Anywhere you want to send them to?
Well, I can share the slides after the conference, and they will dive deep into the talk.
Yeah, and I'll learn a lot more seeing your presentation tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining me, Violetta.
Thank you for
Pleasure
having
to have
me.
you. Thank you. Okay. And next up, we're going to speak with one more of our speakers, Matthias Front. Go ahead, join me in the hot seat here.
Hi, Arin.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining me, especially today on your birthday, I understand. So happy birthday. And you got talked into speaking twice today on your birthday. So quite, I don't know if that's a gift or a punishment, but it's a pleasure to have you here speaking with us on WebRTC Live. And I got to see your talk just a little while ago here at the RTC conference on improving DX and adoption of the membrane framework. So let's start with having you just tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do at Software Mansion.
Okay, so I mostly do media stuff, as we all, and I'm mostly working on the membrane framework, which the talk was also about. So I'm basically doing open source. I implement some media standards, and I try to figure out how to bridge different protocols together and to make API over that like usable and pleasant to use, basically. And since we are a software agency, I also do some projects for crowdsource for clients, and sometimes we use.
Excellent. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the membrane framework, which was as built and open sourced by you and the team at Software Mansion, right? So tell us more about that.
So we've been building that for a couple of years already, and it started because we've been doing some like media solutions with other tools, for example, GStreamer, and we felt that we need something more like that would allow us to iterate a bit faster, and that's where the idea came from. So first we created a radio engine on top of that. That was like allowing people to create account and have your own radio and streaming to masses. And yeah, it stopped running like, I don't know, a couple of years ago, but because basically it turns out that for that project to succeed, you must like convince someone who has really a big radio station, for example, to change to your software. And you come to them, and they tell you, well, cool stuff, maybe in 5 years. So that's the reality. However, that was not the only thing. So we've been building a lot of other projects, and I'm glad that also other companies are using Membrane for their stuff.
Excellent. So what are some of the biggest challenges that developers face with building a streaming media application that the Membrane framework helps them solve?
Okay, so I think that like challenges, at least for example, that we were facing were that basically you run some tool and it doesn't work, and you try to figure out why, and like the only way is to dig in the code. And these tools are also usually complex. Like Membrane tries to solve it by being very decentralized, so that it's split into a lot of different plugins, and each plugin is quite a small thing that you can look into, you can fork and run without like compiling everything or figuring out how every part of the project works. Another thing is like the concurrency stuff, and like this is made quite simple, or at least not terribly hard, by the virtual machine which we are using, which is a Membrane, which is an Erlang virtual machine. And like it makes concurrency more pleasant, so that since we are building on top of that, then we can just make everything concurrent and not have a lot of pains that usually come with that on other tech stacks. So that's another point. Basically, a lot of gains that Membrane has come from the basics that it's built on, so the Erlang virtual machine. And another thing is, for example, fault tolerance, so that each concurrent process within the machine is quite isolated. So when it crashes, we can restart that, and it doesn't affect other parts of the system. So we can have like a lot of pipelines, for example, running concurrently within a single machine, and they can communicate with each other, but they don't rely on each other, so that we can seamlessly restart them if something goes wrong. As opposed to like having a system that runs a lot of simultaneous pipelines, for example, and any bug makes it all go down and all the streams break.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. And yeah, certainly in any sort of streaming media application, handling all the different pipelines, the management of those pipelines, and making that as easy as possible for developers building the system as well as those using it will lead to higher success in that live stream. So that's great. And I know you all have a lot of experience with that. The tech team here at Software Mansion has done a great job setting up this event for us too. So really happy to be a little part of the RTC conference, and our team at WebRTC.Ventures being a small sponsor in the event. Really happy to be here in person. So Matea, since you're our representative from Software Mansion here on this conversation, tell us a little bit about, for those watching this who may not be here with us in person in Krakow for this conference, what would you say to them to encourage them to come next year? It's been a fantastic conference, so give your pitch for them coming in person next year.
Okay, so of course you can watch all the talks online, but I think that the main benefit from having the conference is that you can just be here and talk to people and meet new people and exchange ideas and figure out new things. earlier than yesterday, we've been talking with Lorenzo and some other guys too about like streaming tons of media via UDP to browser and how to do that with streams. So it was a very exciting discussion, and we just solved someone's problem in this conversation. I think, I hope. But yeah, these things doesn't happen online. I mean, it's hard for them to happen online when everyone is somewhere remote, and the barrier is much higher to jump over. So it's I think the main reason to come here and be here in place, to just meet people, talk to people, and figure out new ideas. And yeah, I think that's the main thing.
No, that's great. It makes sense, and I totally agree. Being here in person, it was interesting this morning. One of the, I think it was the first talk this morning, was our friend Chad Hart from WebRTC Hacks, and he was doing an analysis based on like Stack Overflow questions and GitHub commits and data from GitHub about, what is the state of WebRTC in general right now. And generally speaking, spoiler alert, he said the state is pretty good. The community is actually, very active, and you can certainly learn a lot from looking at, what are people asking on Stack Overflow about WebRTC and about streaming media applications. But it's a whole lot different going and searching through the questions and comments on Stack Overflow than it is being somewhere like this in person and having a chance to speak to people. So yeah, I've had a lot of wonderful conversations already. So thanks to you, Mateus, and to the entire team at Software Mansion for hosting this conference. And thanks to all of you who have joined us in this conversation today. So thank you, Mateus.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks a lot. It was great.
Thank you. All right. And for those of you watching the live stream from the conference, we'll be getting back to the conference talks shortly. For those of you watching the live stream through the WebRTC Ventures channels and through WebRTC Live, we will have our regular industry analysis segment with Tsahi in just a moment. And certainly encourage you to go check out the talks from this conference as they're posted online. Really, once again, real pleasure for us to be here from WebRTC Ventures and a sponsor of the conference. And thanks again to Software Mansion for putting together a great event here in Krakow, Poland. So thanks for joining me. Let's make it live. Thanks for joining me today, Tsahi. Let's talk about open source and programmable video platforms. First, let's kind of start with a little high-level definition of the difference from a WebRTC perspective of an open source platform and a CPaaS, a programmable video platform.
Okay, let's start with, I guess, open source. Open source for me is someone that gives you the source code. There are some licensing or, let's say, legal limitations over that code, but they would be somewhat permissive. Mm-hmm. So you can take that code, do as you like with it, and usually you're getting the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's give an example. The fact that I'm going to give you a nice API that allows you to control my car, and that API is open source, doesn't mean that you get the car for free. So for me, that wouldn't be open source either.
Right.
Because there is like the main piece that I need for that is something that I need to buy from someone. Mm-hmm. Or let's say I need to buy that from the provider of that code to begin with. Yeah. Now, why am I saying that? Because we had in the past a programmable video platform called Twilio, where they built their own open source React application reference on top of their platform, and they said that it's open source. Now, the only caveat there being that you can only use that if you pay for Twilio for running your minutes for their programmable video platform. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that brings me to the distinction between the two. They're just not the same, apples and oranges.
Right.
A programmable video platform is someone that hosts his own infrastructure of video components, so you can use it as a third party or you can use it as a customer. Mm-hmm. to build your own application on top of it, whatever that application may be. By the way, he might be using open source to build his own platform. Some or most of these platforms actually do.
Yeah.
And then you get the benefit of not needing to use DevOps and developers that would scale the system, figure out the issues, optimize it, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you pay for someone to manage the service for you. Now that someone will usually also give you an SDK and an API. He would give you them in a form that means that they are source code, otherwise you won't be able to connect to him anyways. Is that open source? I don't care, it doesn't matter. Okay, and again, because what you're paying for is the infrastructure and the SDK or API is only the enabler, that doesn't mean that it's open source, to me at least. It's not how I would use, it's if I would go and say, well, I'm using that, it's open source. No, I'm using that and I'm paying for it.
Right. Well, I like the car analogy that you use, because the only person that's going to give you a free car is family, and we're talking business here, and
Yep.
Nothing is truly free. So, with the open source media server, you're still going to have to manage the infrastructure yourself. A lot of times the groups behind an open source platform are going to, offer you some services that's available for a price, of course, to leverage their expertise.
Yep.
And scaling it is, going to be a concern that you need to either do yourself or contract with someone to do. And then the CPaaS, handles a lot of that for you, but they're charging you a premium for it. Usually you're paying more of like a per minute type of charge, something that transactionally is a higher cost than open source would be, but there's a lot of convenience that comes with it, right? So we've got those kind of two options that we've talked about in the WebRTC world for a long time. But there's also some platforms that are, I guess you could say, bridging that gap between them, trying to offer the best of both worlds between an open source and a CPaaS solution. That kind of give you a little bit of both, I guess you could say. So tell us about a couple of those options and how they came to be.
Yeah, so the funny thing is that I saw that very clearly when I worked on my video API report.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the platforms, and there are two that are slightly different from the rest because they offer kind of two different approaches. You can either come and buy the managed service, the programmable video part that they give you. That would be Jitsi as a service, Jazz, or LiveKit, the cloud variant of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then what they come and say is, look, the platform itself, the video infrastructure that we give you, is built out of this open source platform that we ourselves create and maintain. For Jitsi as a service, that's the Jitsi video bridge with all of the components around that. And then for LiveKit, it's LiveKit. Now, the benefit can be said to be, well, you know what? You can start with our managed service. If it becomes too expensive and you want to start investing on your own, just host your own stuff with the open source parts of that, because the open source is readily available. Or you can do the opposite. You can start with open source, see that it's too much of a headache, and then move and use our platform. There's also a third part of, well, use our open source, but then for certain components, use our programmable video solution for these things. Like, we'll do the recording for you, or we do the telephony part bridging for you, because it's too much of a hassle. Mm-hmm. That's, for example, what Jitsi as a service offers, the ability to get certain components and use them for their platforms as well.
Yeah, I like the this possibility that it offers of being able to transition between the two. In either direction, as you said, I tend to think of it most often the first scenario you described, where when you're first building your product for the first time, you want to get to market as quickly as possible. So you go with a CPaaS type of solution because you can, less infrastructure to manage. Presumably you can get the application done sooner. But then as you start to scale, you start to become more concerned about the transactional costs of that. And so sometimes that's when companies look at either negotiating with the CPaaS provider, which is usually an option when you reach volume, so they don't have to make changes, or they look at implementing additional media servers or switching platforms or going to an entirely open source solution that they manage themselves, because by that point, presumably they're technically mature enough that they can, handle all the DevOps around that, right? So if you're using something like LiveKit or Jitsi as a service and having that option to make that transition in either direction without as many code changes, that's pretty attractive. And I think, and certainly something that sets them apart from other platforms.
Yeah.
So something interesting to look at.
I would say that that's true until you remind yourself of two things. The first one, when you're big enough, the risk of switching even to the same platform and just something that you manage is huge, because you have too many users that are on the line there.
Yeah.
So the risks are still there. They're different though. It's not about development, it's about users.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is the fact that they say that they're open source doesn't mean that all the components that you use from these platforms are open source.
True.
So for example, GT does a very good job at providing almost everything. I mean, including how to scale the GT services and cascade them across the globe and stuff like that, all the scripts around that. I'm not sure if LiveKit does the same. Or do they just give, here is an SFU, now we can build what we built on our own.
Yeah. The risk of any change as you scale is large, of course, as you said. And then the other risk I would point out too is I'll call it, I guess, an integration risk, in the sense that when you use LiveKit as a paid product, they've got live streaming integrations, conversational AI, a lot of options that you start to build in that, with any service, as you use more of their custom paid wrappers around other important things to the flow of your application, that's going to make it harder to switch to an open source from that to a simpler architecture.
Every programmable video platform would try to lock you in, to provide, to put some vendor lock-in in place, which means that switching to something else is going to cost you.
Yeah.
How much? More than you'd like to pay. Hence, you're going to stay with them for another year until you're going to go over the same decision-making process again with the same result, usually.
Right.
Okay. Now, would the ones that offer open source not do the same thing? Sure, they would. But they now have a nice story and excuse of, well, we also do open source, hence you can move back and forth, which is correct to some extent, but I would say not with the customers that they want to keep, which are the large ones.
Right. And then the other option, I've heard seen in some cases, I think is interesting to consider architecturally, is depending on how the pricing tiers for your product works. If you have a freemium tier with fewer functionality, perhaps that's built using open source infrastructure where you can have more direct control over what the transactional costs are of that, or not offer more expensive things like recording, for example. And then only use the CPaaS and the fancier integrations, let's say, to your paid tiers. So using a slightly different architecture in both is another way to go to try and balance these costs.
Well, I heard today of another one with a client, which was very, very interesting. They're using two CPaaS platforms, two programmable video platforms. They use one, but when that one doesn't work because the return servers are being blocked by that specific firewall of that specific customer, they would fall back to the other one, which presumably works at that scenarios, which is interesting. Yeah,
we've seen that as well. Excuse me. More complicated to implement, but a definite possibility. So I want to ask you one last question, Tsahi, about this before we wrap up. So when you think about the number of providers that have, they either specifically offer an open source and a paid solution like LiveKit and 8x8 and Jazz do, and then others like Twilio in the past built on top of Corrento and other providers who have used open source in their architecture somewhere, what does that tell you about kind of the view of the industry? Is it easy enough to build a media server, if that's the right way to say this, that they don't mind sort of giving that away for free? Is the value all in the scaling around it? I mean, I know a lot of people who built media servers. I don't think they would say it's easy, but these companies are kind of willing to focus the pricing on, let's say, the scaling part of it.
I think the answer is complicated. Okay. The first part, it's not easy to write a media server. Otherwise, we'd have more than 4 alternatives out in the market. We probably have more, but you have 4 dominant ones, and all the rest are just, you ignore them.
Right.
And writing one is really hard. Optimizing it for specific use cases is even harder. Now, most of the vendors that provide programmable video solutions would use an open source platform, an open source media server. They won't if they were there earlier. So the earlier the vendor, the more likely he is to use a proprietary media server solution. If I were to open a programmable video company today, not going to do that, but if I would go and use one of the open source platforms, hands down. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
Also, if you look at the history of these platforms, so Jitsi as a service started by Jitsi Media Server, by BlueJean, a company that offered, well, development services. And they happened to have this open source platform. They did their customization work for customers on top. They got acquired and eventually ended up at 8x8. And then the business model in 8x8 couldn't have been, well, let's do customization and support work. It doesn't work in such a company. It's not enough money. So they switched and say, we're going to do programmable video, which makes sense for them. But they kept the open source platform. Twilio acquired Currento, killed it, and then moved on. So there was no open source left out of that from Twilio.
Yeah.
LiveKit is built on top of Pion. Pion is open source. They don't have control over that, even if they do contribute to it. And then they built a LiveKit solution on top of that. So they went through the open source phase, tried to figure out what their commercial, play is there, and ended up with something that is open source and programmable video. Why? I don't really know the reasons behind that. It makes sense because it seems as if they are succeeding in the market, at least by the companies that they're able to attract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're running over time here, but this has been a good conversation. We can probably continue it at another time. Thank you, as always, for sharing your insights with us today, Tsahi. You mentioned your video API report as well. That does, I'm sure, go into more of this in detail. I'm sure that's available at bloggeek.me, correct?
Yep.
Excellent. So go there to learn more about Tsahi's work and to learn more about future episodes of WebRTC Live. Check us out at WebRTC.Ventures. Thanks for joining me today, Tsahi.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.Ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.